We're looking ahead to the 2024 season. Breakout wide receivers. Who are the breakout candidates? Players entering superstardom. Maybe some sleeper wide receivers in 2024. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look at the NFL on the field and in the front office with elite breakdowns to next-level analysis and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there, and we really do appreciate it when you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200. It's not $150 anymore. We're talking $200 now in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So we had kicked around the idea of doing this, and we teased it last week, Matt, of doing some breakout players. And we were just going to do an episode of breakout players in 2024. You start going through teams and players and realizing how many potential breakout candidates there are, and especially at the position we're starting out with here at wide receivers, like, we got to do just an episode about wide receivers alone, because there is so many, and there are so many good wide receivers coming into the league every year. Not everybody hits right away, and there's already some kind of veteran wide receivers as well that are ready to break out, especially those year 2, year 3 guys, which is the sweet spot if you're talking about breakouts, really for any position in the NFL.
100%. So what I did was I just went to drafthistory.com, really focused not on this most recent draft, but the 2 drafts before that, so second-year players, third-year players, especially second-year guys, and realized, boy, this list is getting massive really quick. And then you had the idea, why don't we just narrow it down by position, which receiver might be one of the easier ones or more plentiful ones for sure. There's a lot to see there. We have numbers to back it up. And just because I list a guy doesn't mean you have to run out and get him on your fantasy team. Like these Packers could all kind of trump each other a little bit. They all could break out, but you don't want to start them in fantasy or things of that nature. So what I did was, now I'm looking at drafthistory.com. I just sorted by all the receivers, and I kind of built a list, and I'm looking at them in order of which they were drafted. So that's probably how I'll do it, so I don't skip anyone. But you said you had a rookie you wanted to throw in the mix. I didn't think about rookies.
So I have 2 teams that I can't figure out, and I have them listed with question marks. And I don't know who to choose as my breakout in, or if there is going to be a breakout with these 2 teams. And the 2 teams are the Los Angeles Chargers and the Carolina Panthers. They both drafted wide receivers at the end of round 1, early round 2. Both have big opportunities for young wide receivers on their team. And so we'll start with the Chargers. The Chargers have rookie Ladd McConkey and then second-year guy Quentin Johnston. Somebody has to get targeted in that offense.
Yeah. I've lost almost all faith in Quentin Johnston.
So that's why it's the only rookie on my list is McConkey, and I've got McConkey written down and not Johnston written down, but I have a question mark next to it, and that's what I wanted to ask you is, what do you think? Is there a breakout for the rookie in McConkey here? Because it seems like he's got the best opportunity to break out in that offense, but it is a team that potentially might not throw the ball a ton. Like this is one of the teams. There's a team I'm going to talk about a little bit later. It's going to be the opposite, where there's going to be a lot more balls in the air. There's going to be a lot more balls on the ground for the Los Angeles Chargers. So is this maybe a team where there's no breakout?
Well, I think there's a chance Johnston takes a step forward from awful to below average. You know what I mean? So I don't want to say he's garbage and he won't make the team.
I want to stop you right there, because that's one of we didn't really say what our criteria was going to be. And so when I was doing this, my criteria was, okay, these players are going to leap into a new tier. So it's possible that Johnson breaks out,
goes from tier 5 to tier 4.
Because
You're
you go
right.
from useless to useful, kind of, right? And so there's a player that could be like someone that is not relevant to the NFL or to their team or to your fantasy teams that all of a sudden is now maybe. And is he a useful wide receiver 3 on his football team? Because that would be better than what he was, last year. Really, is he a fine wide receiver 2 potentially in the NFL? That'd be a breakout for Quentin Johnston.
Oh, that'd be a breakout, and that's a far jump. I'm not ready to go there. It's funny you brought up the Chargers and Panthers because I think Mingo in Carolina and Johnston were so disappointing as rookies that I like them. I still have hope that they could, take a step forward and be a useful NFL player. I mean, maybe Mingo can have a Chenault-like career as opposed to hardly be even almost inactive on game day. I absolutely think the McConkey dominates targets for the Chargers. I mean, even as a rookie, I think he's clearly their leading receiver when it's all said and done. And I think probably Deontay Johnson is in Carolina too, which he's already kind of broken out.
So the answer is McConkey, and the answer in Carolina is probably not Mingo because he has to be force-fed the football unless that new offense is going to be built around getting him the ball, and I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. So I think the top receiver there is probably going to be the new guy, the new veteran in Deontay Johnson. He's kind of going to be the same guy he already was. So I don't know if that's a breakout for him in that offense, but maybe there's more there as a true sort of a number one. There's Thielen as well. They drafted Xavier Legette. So it's just, again, it's a team. It's like, I can't really put my flag in one of those guys to be like, oh, it's a breakout Legette or Jonathan Mingo. It's too cloudy there in Carolina.
Yeah. Breakout's a big word for all those guys to me. I mean, maybe Legette does rookie year George Pickens, opens at Deontay, runs a lot of go routes, and has a impact, but it won't be real. Like, I didn't draft him in any of my rookie drafts. I was taking McConkey way ahead of Legette,
You just brought up a name. Can I go to George Pickens? And this is somebody that projecting to go potentially into a new tier. And George Pickens has already broken out, per se, in the NFL as a second round wide receiver. So he's a name that everybody already knows. But I found this stat, which is interesting. And this might be trying a little bit too hard to put Pickens into a category of talent and player. But like the opportunity is there. And you say what you want about Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Like one thing those guys can do is get the ball down the field. They're good deep ball throwers with deep ball accuracy. And that's where George Pickens shines. So here's a stat I saw. Just 4 wide receivers in NFL history, Matt, have posted 60 plus receptions with 18 plus yards per reception by age 22. Those 4 players are Randy Moss, Josh Gordon, Jamar Chase, and George Pickens.
Wow. And Gordon should not be an outlier on there. He was awesome. I mean, it was not, it's not like one of these things is not like the other with Gordon. He was unbelievable. So that was 60 plus catches?
60 catches with at 18 plus yards per reception by age 22.
Wow. I mean, I get it. Pickens, coincidentally, I recorded it yesterday. It went live at midnight last night for my DK podcast, which is a local Pittsburgh one. It's all about Pickens because Matt Harmon just did his reception perception on Pickens. I had a lot of thought. I found some other numbers. I found some fantasy numbers that when Pickens was on the field and Deontay Johnson was inactive, he was almost a wide receiver 1 for fantasy. When Pickens had Rudolph, who, say what you want about Rudolph, he's not great, but he was clearly the Steelers' best quarterback last year. He was like a wide receiver 1 for fantasy. So there's no Deontay, and you think you get a quarterback upgrade, and he's in year 3, and I think he can refine some of his he was pretty raw coming in. I mean, he was not a very limited route runner.
So he can be a better player on top of what he's already good at. The opportunity is there for him. New offense that you would assume breeds some new opportunity. One of their goals is going to be, we got to get this guy the football.
Yes.
The way that the quarterbacks throw the ball in this offense, I think it's just, it all adds up.
Pickens and Freiermuth, I think, is who's going to be getting the ball a lot.
Yeah. So Freiermuth over the middle. So they both might be really, breakout players this year.
They could.
So we'll see if Freiermuth shows up on our tight end list. But I had to throw George Pickens on there, and I thought you might not put him on there, so I wanted to bring him up.
I didn't. I mean, again, receivers I could have went on and on and on about, and I got a bunch of names here that are maybe less obvious. They won't be the number ones on their team, things like that. Like Pickens is going pretty early in best ball drafts, I think. And he still has work to do against zone, and some of his effort things aren't always wonderful. But I'll tell you what, when you watch him in person in practice, it's like, holy smokes.
Like when you go to a practice and there's these freaks of nature out there and you see, okay, this guy's a first round pick of these freaks. Yeah. He's kind of one of those guys.
Like him and Joey Porter Jr., who's 6'3" with arms like a pterodactyl. Dinosaur reference, not by accident, by the way. Dinosaurs have been big, by the way.
We're arguing on Twitter now if pliosaurs are dinosaurs or just reptiles. So that's what
I'm learning a lot the last couple hours.
Yeah, it's above my head. I don't know. I'm only 5 dinosaurs. Great pterodactyl reference though. Next, more breakout wide receivers in 2024. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more. And you can bet on all of it on FanDuel. So right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on everything from Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. There's drafts. There are NFL futures as well, of course, at FanDuel. And all you got to do to get involved is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. Again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Matt, what do you got? Who's on your list as breakout wide receivers in 2024?
So, again, I'm just looking at 2023 draft class, looking at the order of receivers were taken. A couple of these guys I'm going to just speak very quickly about, including Smith Njigba, who was clearly my #1 receiver coming out and didn't do as much as people wanted. I still have high hopes for him. I think he's going to be a great NFL player. Maybe it even takes another year from now, but I have no reservations about Smith Njigba being way more impactful than he was as a rookie.
Yeah.
Good.
I just want to add more because I have JSN on my list, and it's really easy to say, okay, the first receiver that was drafted in going into the second year is the most obvious breakout player you can have. The Pete Carroll Seahawks were it's kind of like the reverse thing that I just talked about going on with the Chargers, right? Pete Carroll, old school coach, they threw the ball, among the fewest in the NFL over the last few years, just by the fact that they're going to throw more. They're going to run more total plays. Like they ran the fewest plays in the league last year. Like that's what kind of team it was. And now you bring in it's Grubb, right, from Washington as the offensive coordinator. Where they're, 3
receiver sets, truck it down the field, Penix, right.
Clock mechanics make it so in the NFL you can't run as fast, so they're not going to run 100 plays a game or anything, or throw the ball 100 times a game, or it's something crazy. But the third wide receiver is a starter and is on the field all the time. It's going to be a lot more 3 wide receiver sets, which means you don't have to have a DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett injury or something to get Jaxon Smith Njigba on the field. And who's going to get targeted the most? Well, it's probably the slot guy. That's where the matchups are. And it might not be big plays down the field and a bunch of touchdowns, but if Jaxon Smith Njigba had 90, 100 catches this year, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. And I really feel like there's a stock up with all the Seattle wide receivers. Like I like DK Metcalf this year, and so I like all of them. I just think they're going to run more plays on offense, and all 3 wide receivers are going to be on the field a lot.
It's a great point about just number of sheer plays. Seattle's always at the bottom of the league, and people don't think about that like for fantasy reasons. But if I run 10 less plays than you do, you're going to put up more fantasy points than me. I mean, it's just it's so obvious. I was thinking the first round, though. I'm going to go with Zay Flowers. I was very impressed with him as a rookie. I think he will be better prepared to handle the rigors of a 17-game season at his size. And I also think because of that, with Mark Andrews out there, more of a full-time role, that helps him. But he is a zone destroyer. And anyone that plays Lamar often plays zone. So they know what they're getting. They get great zone, receivers. And I'm a big fan.
I am going to go with I'm going to go down the list a little bit here. I'm going to go to the 5th round guy who's getting a lot of hype this year, And you mentioned the Green Bay Packers offense, and I don't
Mhm.
know who's going to jump out there. If there's one breakout or if they all just kind of get fed, but Dontayvion Wicks seems like the obvious one to me. And he was a player I loved in the draft last year. So there's some confirmation bias here for me. But Dontayvion Wicks looked like the best wide receiver on the team in the second half last year as a rookie. So to be able to go through training camp and potentially be a guy who's on the field all the time for that team. And I think there's some specific roles that are developing there. So if I was like buying stock in the wide receivers, I think, Watson is Watson. I think you have a clear slot guy in Reed, but I think that wide receiver 2 spot that could be a wide receiver 1 potentially as far as target share goes in that offense. Dontayvion Wicks, I'd be way stock up, and Romeo Doubs, I'd be stock down.
100%. And I remember I liked him a lot coming out of Virginia. You liked him more, but I'm sitting here looking at drafthistory.com, and he went behind, like, this is only a year ago, but this seems so crazy to me. He went behind Darius Davis, Charlie Jones, Tyler Scott, Justin Shorter. I mean, those were the 5 receivers taken ahead of Wicks. But funny enough, the guy that went right behind was Puka Nacua.
Right.
It's the crap, guys. But no, I think Wicks is an easy one, and I 100% agree that Romeo Doubs will be the one that suffers.
Who's up next for you?
I have Jaden Reed, I have Mims, I have Hyatt, but they're not guys I'm like staking my flag on. I do just want to mention, I thought Hyatt would only be a go guy, go route outside the numbers, but he did more than that as a rookie. So I thought that was really encouraging. But the name I wanted to highlight is Josh Downs. I mean, he's so much different than basically every Colt because he's not tall enough to ride the ride. He doesn't have pterodactyl arms, but he's just really good at the game. True slot. I think he could take a little off Pittman's plate in terms of just the sheer volume of the move the chain stuff. Love the way he comes out of his breaks, has some toughness to him. And again, I mean, after drafting Mitchell and having Pittman and maybe you get more healthy tight end play, and they might not throw the ball a ton either. The numbers might not reflect it, but I think Downs is going to be a really good player.
I'm going to go to a year 3 player next.
Okay.
From the second rounder from the 2022 draft. And he's a player that's kind of been written off. But I saw some reports in just
I have one too. I'm curious if it's the same one.
Okay. Is it John Mechie?
No, mine is Wan'Dale Robinson, but okay.
Yeah. So they were drafted back to back, I think.
Yep, they are.
In the 2022 draft. And Robinson probably has more opportunity than Mechie, but with the Tank Dell injury, Mechie might be, and people forget. So John Mechie, if people don't remember, went through, he had leukemia and lost all of his rookie season. He also had an ACL injury. So there was a lot of stuff stacked up for him against him to start his NFL career. And those are things you can imagine that take a little bit of time to get back and come back 100% from and be that top 50 player that he was drafted to be for the Texans. And you look at the Texans roster and you think, oh man, Tank Dell, and they brought in Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, and those guys are already established. Well, with Tank Dell's injury, Mechie might be the number 3 guy this year, and I think there's an opportunity for him. And like I don't project a superstar breakout for John Mechie, but the quote from C.J. Stroud, his quarterback in Houston recently, said that he looks awesome, and the important part is he looks all the way back. And I think that's a big key for me here is what is the player that the Texans thought they were drafting in the second round? Because we still haven't seen that. Could he be that now a couple years removed from all this stuff that he's gone through in his life, injury and the leukemia and back to full strength? And CJ Stroud, now, you hear this stuff from teams. Like I think the least reliable sources are players, teammates, and friends, because of course they're going to say, great things about him. But CJ Stroud says he's going to have a huge impact, but he said he's all the way back, which is the key thing that I was like, yeah, you know what? We haven't seen that. We haven't seen what Mechie is supposed to be yet in the NFL.
That's a really interesting conversation because they even have like Robert Woods. I'm keeping an eye on the Texans because I think the Steelers might be able to land one of these guys cheap, like a Robert Woods, and so he is a little blocked. Couple notes here. So from what I remember, his draft timeline was he probably would have been a first-round pick if it wasn't for the knee. And then they found out about the leukemia after he'd been picked, after he'd become a Texan. So that's just unfortunate. It's bad luck for everybody involved. But he was a borderline first-round tape guy at Bama. I mean, I think that's fair to say. Alongside Jamison Williams, they were part of that same draft class, Bama receivers. And a rule of thumb for me, I don't know if I've talked about this enough either, but coach speak and especially player speak, like I listen to so many podcasts. If they're going to have a current player on, I just fast forward through it because they don't tell me anything. I don't learn a thing.
It's because some players I stop and I have to listen to because they're super interesting. But sometimes it's like, yeah, you know what? They're not really giving me much. And I would rather listen to somebody else's independent analysis than what the player is going to give me.
But I think CJ Stroud might be different. Like, I think he might be a GM someday.
He's one of the guys I stop listening to. He knows
exactly.
Yeah. CJ Stroud. This guy's a superstar.
This guy's a superstar. He sees the game right.
Yep. If CJ Stroud didn't already break out, he would be my number one quarterback breakout. I love this guy. Absolutely.
Yep. I love the way he sees the game. Like, he requested Tank Dell. You know, like, he's involved with player stuff, and I love it. So Mechie's a good one. Should I do Wan'Dale Robinson now, I guess?
Yeah, let's hear about Wan'Dale. He's
another one kind of like Downs. I mean, he's slot only, but I think if he can stay on the field, there will be targets. There'll be reliability there. Obviously, Neighbors is going to be the star of the show. And I mentioned Hyatt. And I think there's a nice trio all of a sudden of young receivers that all do different things.
I like it, man. The year 3 breakouts are the most interesting because they're written off. And you can get John Mechie, like if we're talking fantasy drafts and using that as stock, which we have used this offseason. John Mechie, Wan'Dale Robinson, those guys are free, right?
Yeah.
But they were talented prospects coming out. And the team that believes in them, they're still on there. It's only year 3. We've seen huge breakouts in year 3s in the NFL. And guys like, Deebo Samuel comes to mind. He went crazy. He broke the league in year 3, and so there's a lot of players like that have, even if they're good, they become great in year 3. So a lot of potential breakouts. I've got one more next. That's probably my favorite breakout candidate in 2024 at wide receiver. We'll finish up wide receiver breakouts next. Okay, finishing up our conversation here on 2024 NFL breakout wide receivers. Who's up next on your list, Matt, before I get to my favorite breakout this year?
All right, I'll stick with the theme of 2022 mid to late round picks, and that is Khalil Shakir with the Bills. I think he can play inside. I think he can play outside. Yeah, they got Coleman, but they lost more than they gained at wide receiver. And I think that implies that they're ready to trust him to break out. I mean, kind of the definition of it, and be on the field every snap and maybe end up catching 70 passes.
He's the number one veteran wide receiver in that offense. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's a good way to say it. Right. He's been around the block, and he seems young.
So he's young, ready to break out. He's shown ability, can play everywhere. He's a veteran wide receiver now compared to, the rookie. And notice I didn't say the number one pass catching target. I didn't say the number one receiver necessarily, but he's the number one veteran wide receiver catching balls from a superstar quarterback. That's a huge opportunity and a player I like a lot. So I love that one. Khalil Shakir absolutely belongs on this list. Mine is another second-year player. Was actually drafted after Dontayvion Wicks and Puka Nacua. Is Saints wide receiver A.T. Perry.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Nobody's talking about A.T. Perry. He's going to be a starter, I think, in that offense. And he's an awesome player. He's a red zone weapon. He can go up and get the ball. He can get open. He was kind of billed as more of he's kind of a downfield guy. He can run routes, man. He's got pure hands. He can track the football. He's just got a lot of ability. And I don't know how guys like Wicks and A.T. Perry slide as late as they do on day 3 with some of the players you see drafted at wide receiver. And you mentioned some of those names. But again, this is another one just like Wicks. He was one of our favorites at Locked On 49ers. We loved Wicks and we loved A.T. Perry as some day 3 wide receivers when we were breaking down 49ers potential draft picks in 2023. Neither one of them went to the 49ers, but I'm still all in on both players. And I love A.T. Perry as a breakout player, not necessarily a superstar, but a guy that, it's probably free when you're talking about fantasy value, fantasy cost. He's going to be a wide receiver too this year for an NFL team, and could potentially be more. Like he might not be that far off from Olave, the other guy on the other side, as far as what he could potentially give you statistically.
It's a really good one, and I overlooked him when I was scanning this list. And you were mentioning, like, how does that guy turn into the 195th pick overall and the 24th receiver off the board? And while you're talking, I just double checked. I'm like, did he have a worse combine than I thought of? Ran a 4.47 at great jumps. He's 6'3" and change. Yeah. I mean, he's a big bodied guy.
Tall, skinny wide receivers the league doesn't like anymore. It's really
right.
He would have been a first round pick. He would have been a top 50 pick in like 1999. You know what I mean?
Right. You're 100% correct. But is he really that much different than Christian Watson or, someone that was taken noticeably higher than him? Yeah. It's a really good one. And kind of like what we were talking about with the Giant receiver room, I think Olave is clearly the one, much like Neighbors. Who am I forgetting? The fast dude that gets downfield like crazy, the smaller guy.
Shaheed,
Rashid, who I love a lot. I think Shaheed's really, really explosive, really good. But Perry's so much different that you're kind of putting that basketball team together. I like it. I think he could definitely break out this season.
Who else you like? Any other breakout wide receivers for you, Matt?
He's a little chalky. I mean, I guess it's not all that chalky to talk about a guy that's a mid-round pick from that draft as well. That's Michael Wilson from the Cardinals. I don't think he'll ever be a 1, but I think he can be he can be Robin to Harrison's Batman with a little bit of McBride sprinkled in there as well. Wilson was very impressive to me as a rookie. I loved him at the Senior Bowl. He had some injury stuff coming out. I have some other names, but those are the ones I feel strongest about.
You mentioned a name, and he's a player who's been kind of disappointing so far in Jameson Williams. When we were talking about his former college teammate,
I wanted to bring him up. Yeah,
is he a breakout candidate for you, or is he kind of just a one-trick pony? I don't know, extra piece on that Lions offense.
All the buzz is so strong. The offseason moves, which I think are the most indicative thing to figure out what teams really think of players, are very strong in Williams' favor. And I'll be honest, like in dynasty drafts, I own a lot of them because I'm a little embarrassed of it now, but I had Williams ranked ahead of London, Wilson, and Olave in that draft class. He was my favorite receiver in that class, which I hesitate to bring up because I think those three are unbelievable now. And I'm like, Matt, what were you thinking? But when I watch him, I still see so much inconsistency. I mean, he's had injuries, he's had suspension. It's almost like put up or shut up time. I'm not saying he's going to shut up, but I don't know that he's going to like break out and light the world on fire.
He's almost the player that if I was another team, I'd just try to trade for him and see if I could, just a new situation, fresh start might be helpful for him. Because you mentioned so his rookie season was ruined by an ACL from college that, he didn't get the right start to his NFL career. Then finally had a training camp, but then had a suspension in year 2. And everything's already established in that offense for him. So maybe a little bit more difficult to break through than you'd expect from the 12th pick in the draft. I still have some hope there with him, but the way he plays isn't necessarily a well-rounded game either. So I don't know. I would like to see him on a new roster, to be honest with you.
So that brings me to another name that was also a first-round pick that year, and that's Treylon Burks, who, as much as I liked Williams, I had that many questions about Burks coming out of Arkansas. I mean, so many manufactured touches, behind the line of scrimmage, yak stuff. But they asked him to be AJ Brown, which he isn't even close to doing. I mean, lining up as an X receiver and beating good man coverage. Now they have so many receivers. I wonder if you could pry him away for a 5th round pick and see what he could do in Pittsburgh, perhaps. You know what I mean?
Right. I think you could get him for nothing too.
For nothing, right? They have so many receivers out.
Yeah, and the reports still aren't good. Like they're like the coach was talking about in Tennessee. The coaches are talking about he'll probably have a role on special teams this year. It's like that's what they're expecting from Treylon Burks. He was the first round a long ago. So
maybe get him for a 6th or 7th.
That's way down.
Somewhere else. Yeah,
he absolutely needs a fresh start somewhere.
Yeah, and he may never hit, but I would bet on the talent for that cheap.
There was another player from that draft I wanted to talk about now. And, Jahan Watson, the other one, he was right in between Jameson Williams and Treylon Burks in that 2022 draft. It's a new regime, new coaching staff, new quarterback there in Washington. Jahan Dotson, what do you expect from him this year? Is there a tier jump for him in that Commanders offense?
Yeah, I thought he was very good as a rookie. I didn't think he was any worse last year, but the numbers and the production were worse. But that was a bad offense that just had so many sacks, and I felt bad for Howe, actually. I thought it was a poorly designed offense, bad blocking. I think, and people take this as a negative. I think he's a very solid number 2. That's great. You know, I mean, if the Mechis and Burks and all these guys have question marks, or A.T. Perry's, or, any of these guys we talked about turns into a very solid number 2, that's like a 3-tier jump for them. So I think that's who Dotson is. You know what I mean?
That's good. That's well said. Yeah, because we're talking like you expect so much from these first rounders, but it's like he's a good, solid starter.
Yeah,
that's a hit. That's a hit in the NFL draft.
That's a hit. 16th pick of the draft for that. Sure.
Yeah. We talked a lot about this 2022 class, and we've talked about almost all of these guys, and obviously, Garrett Wilson, and he's already broken out, and I expect an even bigger year from him. But that doesn't really count necessarily on this because I think he's a star already. But I just saw a clip of Tyquan Thornton with the Patriots, who's like looking ripped in his like best shape of his life. I don't know how much stock to put into that, but certainly there's an opportunity with the Patriots. So I wouldn't plant my flag with Tyquan Thornton. I thought he was way too one-dimensional and didn't really love him in the draft as it was. I thought he was drafted too high, but he's putting in work, which is a good sign. You got to go stock down on Alec Pierce now with the Colts, with Sky Moore and the Chiefs. Finishing up the second round wide receivers from that class.
100%. These seem like super old guys, but there's one 2021 name I just wanted to throw out there. I mean, this is the Chase, Waddle, Smith class. I mean, like those guys have already made it. They're already getting their contracts. But I think Bateman with the Ravens is still pretty interesting too. Yeah. Like he's been hovering a little too long. Could he be a solid number 2?
Yeah, he had the ACL thing. Like a lot of these receivers we're talking about, an ACL that can knock out a couple of years because it takes a while to really be 100% again. He's had, the injury problems. The fact that they wanted him back is interesting. He's another player. It's like, I want to see a team trade for him. I want him to get an opportunity somewhere else, fresh start. I almost don't like that he stayed there, but they like him enough and gave him a new deal, right, to stick around. So they like him, which is a good sign.
They didn't pick up the 5th-year option, but they added something to his existing contract, which is a ring endorsement. It was easy not to pick up his 5th-year option,
Right.
But could he be the 3rd leading receiver on that team behind Andrews and Flowers? Okay, catch 60 balls, get in the end zone 5 or 6 times. Possible.
There you go. Our breakout wide receivers for 2024. Let us know if we missed your favorite breakout this season. Part of our series of breakouts in 2024. We'll come back with all the other positions in the NFL, defensive players, quarterbacks, running backs, tight ends, of course. And we'll be breaking down your team the rest of the ways we get ready for training camp here.
Not that far away.
Summertime. All right. Talk to you then. Right here. Peacock and Williamson.